But a guy that will be a thing in the NFL, Jordan Tyson. All right, and this is the one I switched. I told you, Aaron, I had kind of more of a mild take, and then I changed it because I was like, you know what, we're not here for these mild takes. We're going to get a little fire, a little Diablo on this one. Jordan Tyson, wide receiver out of Arizona State, will be ranked higher than Zachariah Branch by the end of the season.
Welcome in to the Devy Devotional Podcast, a show devoted to all things Devy and C2C. Hosted by John Arrington and Aaron Wilcox. This dynamic duo brings you actionable strategies with player-driven analysis for your Devy and C2C leagues. Let's dive in.
Let's dive into Jordan Tyson. Welcome into the Devy Devotional, where we stay devoted to Devy. I lost a little hair since that last one, but welcome in, everybody. I appreciate you guys being here. I'm joined, as always, by Aaron Wilcox at Aaron Wilcox86 on Twitter. And tonight we have a lot that we're going to talk about, but I wanted to start the show off with Jordan Tyson because I noticed that he's starting to get a lot of hype, man. He's starting to get a lot of love from the Devy community, the C2C community. You know what I don't hear? I don't hear people giving Dynasty Coach A any love for his Jordan Tyson take. So, Aaron, is it still Diablo? And how are you doing, buddy?
No. I mean, at the time, very Diablo take. At this time, very much like, oh yeah, we should have seen that coming, or not even seen it coming, but just realized that was a great call. So yeah, I give you a lot of credit with that, and that is certainly not an easy thing to throw out there, because it was so much of a projection, but man, that has that's transpired. So I like it. I know we're doing quarterbacks here today, but man, the wide receiver takes like that, the Diablo takes, ooh, that's quite a way to get started.
Well, I mean, I do appreciate that, we do hot take pods so that we can make calls like that because, I mean, it's no one guaranteed it or anything like that. I didn't guarantee it. I wish I had, but I mean, that would take some real cones. So I was like, no, but I mean, just the fact that I originally it was going to be better than Matthew Golden. I mean, that was like 6 months ago. So like, I would have been right with both of them, but I just love that Tyson is getting his due, or and that he's really starting to look like one of the better wide receivers. That's not necessarily what we're here about tonight, but I was listening to some pods today, and like I said, I was like, man, Jordan Tyson's getting a lot of love all of a sudden. And so I just wanted to bring it all back. But I know Aaron wanted to get into some strategy talk, and then just like we did last week with the last pod with the wide receivers, we're going to get into the state of the Devy QB landscape, which is probably not going to take nearly as long as the wide receivers did because there's not that many good ones, so it won't be all that crazy. But Aaron, you wanted to talk some strategy. I know obviously we're getting into C2C playoffs. We're getting into that. Is that why you're feeling this itch to do some strategy talk, or was there something else that brought it on?
Yeah. So we are approaching the end of the season, like you said, playoffs for C2C leagues going on, starting this week. So we've already had the kickoff of some games here yesterday, and we'll continue the rest of this week, and that'll be the first round. And it is one of those times where it creeps up on you and it's here really fast, and then it's over. And then we have a whole off season to talk all about, building strategy, trade strategy, startup, supplementals, etc. But right now, I don't necessarily hear a lot of folks talking about, how can you try to rebuild, or how can you try to compete with your roster at this time of the season? And I guess some of the thoughts that I have is just like, if you're in a rebuilding team, just get something out of your aging or win now NFL, or sorry, your win now campus assets. And just get something out of them, because at the end of the day, I mean, if they're not going to be Devy studs, or they're even just kind of coin flip to even make the NFL, it's just like, get something out of them, get some promising picks, you can maybe package those for a really nice player at some point, whatever the case is. But yeah, I just see a lot of folks hesitant and they're like, oh, I really like this guy. But I mean, just think of how many running backs from every class are relevant. And it's not 20 different guys in every draft class. It's like 5 guys or maybe 2 guys on a down year. It could be 10 guys on a really strong year, but typically the guy that you think is could be like this amazing day 3 sleeper who's not getting any hype. He's probably not getting any hype for a reason. So sell those guys on the campus side if you're not in the playoffs, not competing. And then if you are competing, I mean, opposite thing, just buy up those guys. And I love C2C leagues because you can potentially compete on both sides, or you can choose to push your chips in more on one side. So you can stock up on the campus side or the NFL side. So, but it's easy enough this time of the year to land some CFF starters without completely mortgaging your future. But yeah, I mean, I don't think that you also need to pay up with like campus first or anything to do that. That's BS. You really don't need to send early round campus picks all the time. Like I get if it's like a true stud, you might have to, but I don't blame anybody for asking or inquiring at a mid-round price for some of the CFF assets, these high-scoring guys who don't have no Devy potential. I don't mind at all if somebody kind of lowballs me with that. I try not to take those things too personally. I'll kind of move on. I'll counter if it's close, whatever the case is. But throw some trades around there, get into those conversations, try to make your team better in the long term this time of year as people are either fully, rebuilding, looking to the off season or looking to compete.
So I actually had a listener, a follower, whoever asked me a question about this recently, and they were saying like, how much should I give up? Like they're brand new or they're new to C2C this year. They were asking me this exact same question. Now they ended up making a trade, and it was Jerwan Newton for a future campus fourth. And I said I'm smashing that all day, every day. Like you're essentially taking a player that maybe has 1 year left, of eligibility, like probably not even. I'm pretty sure he's a 5th-year player, so he might not even have a year left. And although I don't know how that all works for some of these players can play until they're 50, so it doesn't matter. But regardless, I said I told him the first thing you have to do is figure out, is this player NFL viable? Like that's the simple, clear cut thing. Is this player NFL viable or not? If you say no, then you have a pretty clear shot at that, where you have a clear idea at that point of what you should do, and that is, if you didn't make the playoffs, you need to get that player off your team, and or do a decent job of trying to get that player off your team. Not that you have to get him off or anything like that, because like I said, sometimes these guys can come back for a 5th, 6th, 7th year, whatever. But obviously this is just one isolated incident. This isn't, it's not going to work in every league or with every player or whatever. But, how are you feeling about that trade? And, with that advice of, like, hey, once you figure out that player is not going to be, I don't think Jerwan Newton or anyone thinks that Jerwan Newton's going to be this NFL stud or anything like that. Once you figure that out, what are we doing? And then what are you selling for?
Yeah, no, I like that idea. And that was a great trade. Probably more so for the seller, the person trying to get out of a player who's more of a CFF type of asset. Because I wouldn't pay a 4th, and I'm kind of cheap in that way. I'm stingy. And I know some analysts out there will say, well, you got to really pay up if you want any guys to add to your lineup in terms of picks. And I just don't necessarily always agree with that. There are those cases like in past years when Rasheen Ali was like just totally like 30 points per game. He was like Ashton GNT, but maybe not quite the name recognition and whatnot, or not quite that level of production, but still those elite guys. Yeah, you got to pay up. But for the most part, I like that advice, try to capitalize on selling those guys for what you can get when you realize that they're just, G5 starters, but they're not like future NFL starters. Or for example, just give another trade example. I just traded, I think it was a 5th round pick for Damon Claiborne, running back for Wake Forest, plus a 10th back. So it's like I basically traded down in the draft to land a guy who should start for me this week. So now in a different league, I kind of went somewhat all in on the CFF production, and I traded for Trey Stewart, and who's been a CFF monster this season at the running back position, and Ahmad Hardy, who is a talented young freshman for a G5 program, though. And I landed those guys, but I had to trade away Richard Young, Alabama running back, who's starting to get a little bit of playing time, but again, he's just really unproven, and I don't know that he's the future there. And then I traded away Cam Davis, who is a FSU freshman running back, who's just not really looked good this season, but I don't blame that on him. Like, the season that FSU is having is just terrible. They're an awful team this season. So anyways, a couple of Devy guys for a couple of CFF starters there. So I'm hoping that works out for me both in the short and long term. But those are just a couple examples of moves that I've made this week to try to bolster some teams that I have, because I made the playoffs in all the C2C leagues, and I would like to advance, and I'd like to win some ships. I mean, that's why we play this game. And if you're not winning it this year, then maybe try to go out and win it next year.
Don't know how to say this without like sounding like we're just bragging or whatever, but I also made the playoffs in all of my CDC leagues, so go us. We're doing pretty well here, but I think on the other hand, the people that didn't make the playoffs, what are you trying to do at that point? Obviously, I think the easiest thing, and you can say this, whether it's C2C Dynasty redraft, or maybe not redraft, but C2C Dynasty, whatever. The obvious thing is going and looking at, injured players like your Cedric Baxters and players like that have just been sitting on IR spots, but, like maybe, hey, you give up that Jerwan Newton, but you get a Cedric Baxter back, like that kind of thing. If you didn't make the playoffs, beyond trying to get rid of those players that probably won't be around next year or be on your roster next year, and even like I said, trying to get some like injured players like that kind of thing that aren't going to affect your points or anything like that. Is there anything else that you're really trying to do if you didn't make it? Because obviously, I think the goal, if you did make it, is pretty obvious. You're trying to get points. You're trying to, whatever it is, without maybe possibly mortgaging the future. But that seems pretty clear cut.
Yeah, absolutely. And just even past that, just looking ahead to see how many guys are graduating or projected to move off of your campus roster could be nice, because maybe at this time of the year, you can somehow get an extra pick thrown in if you're really needy, which you might not be able to do that come draft time for your supplemental drafts next season. So just being aware of those things. I know a lot can change as well. Guys can switch teams, guys can medically retire, transfer out, whatever. But yeah, just have kind of a general idea of what the status of your team is, what it needs this time of year. Even if you aren't making a lot of splash moves, at least analyze that, I guess. And yeah, the off season is going to be fun. It's a long off season always. So if you can jump in and make some deals this time of year, why not? And reach out to us, reach out to other analysts out there for trade advice, or like, hey, I'm really kind of on the fence on trading away this guy. Does he have NFL potential? Is he an NFL asset? Well, feel free to ask around, or just search campusagain.com. There's all sorts of resources out there where you can kind of see where guys are ranked, if they are ranked indeed. Like you have your own Patreon where you do some of that as well with your player analysis and how they factor it or how they score in your model. Like there's just all sorts of resources out there to help you when you're not exactly sure. You're kind of new to this space and you're not sure what moves to make or if it's a good move. But I would say don't just make no moves because you're afraid to do so. Like sometimes you have to take a little bit of a gamble there and maybe do a little bit of research first. But I think that playing scared and never making any moves, that's how you stay middle of the pack or a bad team. That's my experience.
To dive in a little further, would you say, and I mean, I know I've always been a little more willing to just give up on a player than you have. And I mean, and really more than most Devy players or analysts or anything are willing to. I'm kind of just like, I'm out, and it doesn't always work out, like I guess a good example would probably be like a Jam Miller, would probably be a pretty good one. And I was kind of just out And not to say that it's been perfect, but he probably has more value than even I was giving him credit for, in the offseason or wherever. But then it's also worked out great with, guys like Quinn Ewers and Devin Brown, and especially a lot of the quarterbacks and stuff. If you have a player like, let's say, like a Nico I, if you have a player like that, where it's like, yes, they have some things that they check some boxes, and I like this player, but it hasn't really quite been as good as I would have liked it to have been. And you're in that more of that rebuilding mode. And this doesn't mean like I'm looking for a contender or whatever. Like, you might be able to look at all 12 teams here and say like, okay, I have 11 trade partners, but are you trying to maybe double up some picks or something like that? If that player's still holding some value, and you say, okay, I spent a first on Nico I. Let's say I spent 106 or whatever on Nico I, in last year's supplemental draft. I'm gonna go ahead and trade him now for 2 firsts, or whatever it is. If you're still able to get that kind of value, or even like a first and a second, or whatever it may be, are you willing to do something like that to try to get multiple? Because we know the hit rates aren't the greatest, especially with with these picks. And so, are you willing to kind of make that move or take that risk, I guess, but with the possibility, okay, now I'm doubling my odds, I'm doubling my chances of possibly getting one of those superstar players, because I've already seen that Nico I might not necessarily be the player that I thought he was. And I don't mean to pick on Nico. There's obviously other examples, but it was just kind of a good example, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. No, there are certainly guys who just kind of disappointed, but still have retained value. And if you can get that top end value, I'm all for it. Um, Guys like Jackson Arnold, guys like Connor Wigman, I'm not necessarily going out of my way to try to trade those guys away right now, unless, like you said, there's somebody who still kind of views them as a very, very high upside or very, very valuable asset. But at this point, you're kind of better off just holding those guys, because you know that there is quite a bit of talent there. Same thing with Nico I. It's just that Nico I's value has not necessarily dropped to the degree of those other guys who kind of lost their job and had injury and other things happen this season. So I would say that the guys who have really fallen a lot, I've run into that issue before, just trying to give up on them, trade them away too early, and it comes back to bite you. At the very least, those guys could catch on somewhere else and be a CFF superstar for your Campus to Canton leagues. But for Devy upside, I mean, yeah, that gets a little more sketchy trying to hang on to those guys. But every year there's guys where you're like, okay, I'm going to finally cut Caleb Johnson. And then he goes off for Iowa the next year. Or I'm going to cut Evan Pryor for, former Ohio State, now Cincinnati running back. And now he's looked really good this season. He's set to be like a feature back there next season. He's been super efficient and explosive in limited touches. He's a guy that I'm glad I've kept on to, but easy just to like kind of move off of him or drop a guy like that. Because we value the guy, or like we look at these guys like, what have you done for me lately? But remembering back to maybe some of the talents or some of the flashes that they've had, it really depends what your return is, I guess, to answer your question. But there are more guys like Jaquindon Jackson. We gave up on him basically, and then he had a really, really great start to the season. He's been injured now for a while, but from a CFF standpoint, at least, sometimes those guys do bounce back. So it's like, do you really want to move off those guys prematurely? It's always a tough call, that's for sure, but they can always bounce back. There are examples of that each year, that's for sure.
So with the guy, and going back to Nico, I mean, because like I said, he has not been bad. He's just maybe not been as good as we'd hoped he was going to be. But he still has time to get better. Once again, he's definitely not bad. He's still a top 5 QB for me in all of Devy. That's not really saying much, because we'll get into the state of the QBs here in a little bit. But it's just not saying all that much. Are you kind of treating it like the high end guys in Dynasty, where like you don't just want to do it for picks, and you would rather do it for like a player and picks and like that kind of thing, where you kind of mix it up and say, like, I actually do believe in this player that I'm trading for. Like, maybe you try to get like a Sam Levitt or somebody like that, and try to throw in get a first added on top of him or something, and now you say, okay, I have a player that I kind of believe in, and on top of that, I still have a first round pick that I can play around with.
Yeah, no, I love that for sure. Like, player and pick, a couple different picks, usually it is a good way to go. That's for sure. As long as they're quality enough, right? Not looking to dice him into a bunch of like late round flyers and kind of meh producers. You still want to get something of value. That's for sure.
All right, and then I have one other question that just popped into my head, and honestly, this was not planned by me as much as I would like to act like I did. But in the C2C League of Record, the campus2can.com League of Record League, I made the playoffs, and in that league, you have 4 waiver pickups throughout the entire season. Now, I used 2 of my waiver pickups earlier in the season, and then I had saved 2 of my pickups, and I was planning I was going to go into Devy Beth, and I was going to figure out who's hidden, what and all that, and I was going to get some like possibly future studs or whatever. Like I didn't necessarily need it for my team, like as far as like a CFF pick or whatever. So the plan was to save those picks and then use them eventually to get, some like possible future studs or something like, something to that effect. Well, this week I made the playoffs and I'm looking and I'm like, man, I have like 5 of my starters on a bye. And so I ended up using those 2 waiver pickups to pick up like 2 basically more CFF options than, CFF only options than like future Devy studs or anything like that, even though one of them is kind of getting me excited, but we'll talk about that another day. But I mean, essentially I went with like CFF only options that are, getting 20, 30, 40 points a week or whatever, so that I can go through and roll through the playoffs, hopefully, and just dominate. Have you ever done anything like that? Obviously every league's different. Some leagues you have unlimited waivers, some leagues you have no waivers. But have you ever considered doing that? Have you ever done it yourself, or or would you be willing to try to save a couple picks to do that? Like, hey, I feel good, like I'm gonna make the playoffs. Let me go ahead and get 2 like CFF studs like right as the playoffs start. I know they're not on a bye. I know this, I know that, like that kind of thing. Like I said, this was not my plan, so I can't take too much credit for it, but it seems like it may work out for me.
Yeah. I mean, I don't mind that at all because I personally, and I've seen other examples of this, have just blown some picks early in the season. So pickups off of waivers, to be specific. I've blown those on guys who looked really good early on, but it was just kind of a fluky, small sample size type of deal. And you get burned. You're like, well, I wasted, 2 of my pickups on guys who are maybe solid, but not really going to help you win the league ultimately. And so I get that you have to be early and react on like a Caleb Johnson breaking out when he's on waivers. It's like you only have a week or 2 to really jump on that. Same with, I mean, there's a bunch of other examples of that this season, but I will say that I don't mind holding 1 or 2 till the very end of the season and then just claiming some sort of like emergent CFF stud or maybe a Devy asset, right? That's peaking at the right time. So certainly it's not a bad idea to save, but again, you have to be aggressive enough early on. So there's a balance. But if you're pretty confident that you're going to make the playoffs, it's definitely saving some till the end is a good strategy, or maybe reaching out to some of the teams who haven't used theirs yet and saying like, hey, I mean, if you claim a guy, I will, I'll trade you some solid picks or maybe Devy assets if you can get a guy off of waivers for me. So, and in my mind, there's nothing wrong with doing that. I know some folks are like, oh, is that sketchy type of thing to do? And it's not really any different than, well, if you end up getting a quarterback, this next week, let me know because I would like to trade for one. It's like, it's not, I don't think that there's anything too dicey about it, but I think that helps the rebuilder, right? They get something out of, picking up somebody on waivers, and it helps the contender. It's another crafty way to get better as a guy who's trying to contend. So anyways, those are just a couple ideas, but yeah, certainly saving till the end of the season, that's a viable route.
And I didn't do that in our other league, in the Devy University League. I didn't save it, and I used my 4, not like right away, but by mid-season, I was done. So like, there's no right or wrong way. It's just the way that it worked out. And honestly, like I kind of, not to say that I forgot that I had them, but I meant to do more research, and I just never got around to actually doing it. So it kind of worked out for me. And I was like, wait a second, I went and looked. I have 2 picks left. And so it worked out pretty well. So we'll have to see how that all plays out. But like I said, I just got two pretty good players to start, and I started Terrion Stewart yesterday, who got like 25 points or something like that. So I'm off to a good start in that league. So we'll have to see what happens, though. But you guys aren't here to hear about our leagues per se, unless we're talking about strategy talk, which we were. We are here for the state of the quarterback class. And are you ready to get into the trenches here? Get dirty, get muddy, because I'll tell you what, it gets ugly quick. And I mean, you could probably find some people that are just like, I want nothing to do with any of them. I don't want any of these quarterbacks. There's not a single one that I truly believe in. Hasn't proven anything. Hasn't done enough. Blah blah blah. I'm not that. I'm not out there. I still find some players that I do like and love. And there's some that are hitting the minimum thresholds that I'm looking for, which is nice because I've seen doing Beth for this many years. I've seen like it doesn't always have to be the perfect prospect. And we've even seen this year, sometimes the perfect prospect, the generational prospect in Caleb Williams doesn't work out, and sometimes you find out that it's more of an organizational problem and not necessarily a player problem, at least not as much. And so that obviously factors in as well. And we can say, oh, this player is perfect or this player is not. And, sometimes you get Caleb Williams going to the Bears and sometimes you get Brock Purdy going to the 49ers, and it's like they're both solid players. One you would say was a better prospect than the other, but yet, one's dominating the NFL and one's not. And you can see, why that is happening. But I think we should probably start with some of the obvious, like, I don't know if busts are the right word here, but I kind of want to start from the worst and go to the first, if you're okay with that. Just because I just want to get some players out of the way, like Quinn Ewers. I just want to get him out of the way. I don't want to harp on Quinn Ewers for too long. Unfortunately, for a lot of people, he was a highly sought after prospect. He highly sought after recruit. He was drafted at 101 in many supplemental drafts, and he has just not worked out the way that people were hoping. Obviously, he sits his first year, does absolutely nothing. Then he transfers over to Texas, looks okay, but has really just almost gotten worse like every single season, it seems like. And I don't really know how you get worse, with the supporting cast and everything he has. His numbers have gone down every single year. I'm actually scrolling down right now. I didn't realize he had fallen this far. His intended air yards are down for the past two seasons, are down to 7.4 now. 7.4 intended air yards. I mean, he's barely pushing the ball down the field. 3.6% big time throw rate the past two seasons. He's barely making these big plays, these big throws that we're looking for, like NFL throws, like you want to say. Once again, with the supporting cast that he has, it just, I mean, are you ready to write him off? I know, obviously, I've been ready for a while, but a lot of people have been like, no, wait, you gotta wait. Are you ready to write him off, or do you think there's a way he could come back and prove that he can be an NFL quarterback?
Yes, I think that there's a path where he certainly can. I don't know that it will be here at Texas, to be honest. I think he'd have to transfer out, use another year of eligibility, which he has, to go to another system, and maybe that could work out for him. I don't know if he could go to a USC and work under Lincoln Riley or something like that. But Quinn Ewers has, I know you said that he hasn't looked as good this year, but he certainly has looked a lot better than he was in 2022, as far as, nice boost in his completion percentage, his average yards per attempt, his touchdown to interception ratio a little bit better this year compared to 2022, but he has not improved since last year. You're right. And he hasn't taken that step forwards. And I know losing Xavier Worthy, AD Mitchell, like that hurts, but there's still good guys at Texas. I mean, I still really like a couple of the guys in that wide receiver core. So yeah, Quinn Ewers at this point, he's just kind of average, right? Not going to do much to elevate an offense. Going to make some mistakes. He's not very mobile. He's not the, rushing threat who's going to get you a lot of fantasy points. So kind of an unspectacular option within this class.
I agree. Now, this next player is actually directly ahead of Quinn Ewers in my ranks, but I feel like, well, I don't know. Honestly, some of the mock drafts that I've heard, some of the people that I've heard talking about it, whether analysts or just fans or whatever, still seem to love Quinn Ewers quite a bit and still seem to hold him to a high regard. So maybe they'll also hold this other player as to a high regard as well. But it's Garrett Nussmeier, and it's a lot of the same things that I'm looking at with Nussmeier. He was a player that was getting a lot of hype and possibly, going to be one of those like secret players that, that like kind of sneaks a sleeper player, whatever, that kind of sneaks in and all of a sudden is a top 5 QB in the class. And I just don't know how you could possibly say, after seeing what he's done this season, that he's going to do that. I know he started out kind of hot. People saw that game against USC, and they saw, oh man, I see those NFL throws, man. And he does seem to have like 1 or 2 really good throws per game. The problem is he has like 28 really bad throws per game. And so it's just like, yeah, the 1 or 2 throws don't really do it for me. 4% on the dot, big time throw rate, not cutting it for me. A 9.9 intended air yards, that's not bad. I don't hate that. But he needs to get the big time throw rate up there. But the biggest thing for him, and it's where I kind of bring in like a Will Levis-esque comp for him, is the 2.93% interception rate. And the dude just turns the ball over way too much. He's not safe with the ball. He's so erratic in the pocket. And I mean, some of the interceptions that he's thrown really do remind you of Will Levis. Just like, I have no idea what and is picked. And next thing you know, it's a pick six. And I just don't ever want that player to be the QB of my league. And we see, I mean, how I feel like I've made the same exact argument for or against Will Levis, and we see what's happening with Will Levis in the NFL right now. And I assume if he does go to the NFL, that we'll be seeing very similar things from Garrett Nussmeier. I know you had held more hope for him, but are you out now, or are you still holding on a little hope because, once again, he does have those NFL throws every once in a while?
Yeah, no, I've never really been a Nussmeier guy. You know me. I mean, compared to you, sure. I mean, but that doesn't mean a whole lot here because, you're the anti-Nussmeier guy, understandably. I was definitely trying to be the middleman there, but I can't defend him. That's for sure, based on just the interceptions that he's thrown this season. And like you said, sometimes it's like that Will Levis, like I don't know what I'm doing, but other times he throws it with confidence, but he's just throwing it to the other team with confidence. And that's not a good thing either. Ultimately, you can say, well, his wide receiver core isn't as good as what we're used to at LSU. And that's true, but that doesn't excuse some of the mistakes, some of the things that are going on there, and some of the issues he's had with accuracy, decision-making, and he's not necessarily just doing what they need him to do. So, and he's not a rushing threat. He's another guy. So I have more hope at this point. I would rather have a Quinn Ewers, because I think that Quinn Ewers can maybe go somewhere else and, I don't know, make some noise. I mean, I think that Nussmeier will stay ultimately as well. He is in this class, but just based on what he's put out there this year, it's not so promising. So I prefer Quinn Ewers as a asset, but yeah, I mean, neither one of them for this class's purposes am I that excited for.
All right, I'm glad we got those 2 out of the way. There's one more I think we need to get out of the way, and then we can really start talking about like the QBs that matter in this class, because now this is a player that most people had as the QB1 or at least a top 3 QB at the very least going into the season, but he has just steadily dropped off, and it's Carson Beck from Georgia. I don't know how you can. It was kind of the same thing I was just saying with Nussmeier. I don't know how you can see what he's done this year and still say, oh, he's going to be a first round QB, even a second round QB, an NFL QB. Every number has come down substantially for Beck, and unfortunately, his numbers weren't even that great to begin with. And I'd talked to you about it, off the air, but I'd also, I think, talked about it a little bit on the pod, just saying, like, I expressed a little bit of concerns about his numbers being a little lower than I would have liked. The intended air yards were a little lower, even last year when he had a much better year. The big time throw rate wasn't quite there. Like, he only had a 3.8% big time throw rate last year. He only had 3.5% this year. So, I mean, it's actually gotten a little bit worse. The intended air yards are 8.5. There were 8.5 last year. So I mean, it's exactly, he's just not pushing the ball down the field. That's more of backup level, like NFL backup level, like QB play. That's what I see when I see lower intended air yards, lower big time throw rate. It's like, it's a guy that could go into the NFL. He could serve the purpose of not losing a game for a team or whatever, but they're not going to go out and win a game. Yeah, here we are. Last year he had a 1.28% interception rate. This year he has a 2.93% interception rate. How do you have a 3% interception rate when you're only pushing the ball down the field 8.5 yards? Like, how does that even happen? I don't understand how that happens. So I expressed some concerns. Obviously, things could be better. I guess they could be worse, but I've still heard some people saying, "Oh, I still have him as like a late first round QB in the NFL draft," and blah blah blah. And I can't get behind that. I really I can't. And I even had him in my top five recently. It was more of having, like, I put out a graphic on Twitter. It was more because I really needed a fifth player, because I created a graphic that has five spots and I'm lazy and I didn't feel like creating one that had four. So, but I kind of hate myself for even putting him in the top five, because at this point I'm just completely out.
Yeah, no, I'm not that interested with the way that he's unraveled. I mean, the first 3 games of the season, fine, right? But even against Kentucky, that third game, it's like he didn't throw any touchdowns. He didn't look particularly good. Um, so yeah, the guy has just unfortunately unraveled. That Alabama game, that loss earlier in the season, really maybe messed up some of that confidence there, and yeah, just spiraled. And the guy was safe, but always unspectacular. That was my biggest concerns with him coming into this season. It's like, I think, yeah, he could be solid, but what is the upside? And now we're seeing, well, not only is the upside kind of lacking, the downside is certainly there. The interceptions, like you said, are there. The inaccuracies, the limitations throwing down the field, all of that is present, and he's not a rushing threat. So yeah, I'm kind of out on him as well. And he's a guy who, I mean, he's, I think, out of eligibility. He's been around for a while, so I don't know that, he's going to pop somewhere else and then really go off. Like, yeah,
I
there's
think he
just
might
not a
have
lot of
one more
hope.
year, just because I'm pretty sure he redshirted at one point, so he might have 1 year left. But I mean, I kind of was under the assumption that he was coming out this year no matter what. Now it just seems like, I mean, I highly doubt he's going to be the quarterback for Georgia, like going forward. I would assume that they would try to move on, even if he does have eligibility. But like I said, it it's very backup level numbers, but I mean, that's not saying much. Honestly, at this point, uh, if I had to comp him, I would probably say like a Spencer Rattler, like somebody like that. From this past class, where it's just like a lower level. Um, it's like a lower level A dot, like intended air yards, but still turns the ball over. And we've seen what Spencer Rattler does in the NFL as well. I don't know. Aaron was saying that my audio might be messed up, so I apologize about that. I will see if I can figure something out if it's on my end. But why don't we get into the next players? And we're getting into the tier of players where I actually think that these players can actually be NFL viable. That doesn't necessarily mean that I think they're going to be perfect, or they're going to be like studs in the NFL or anything like that. But I think any of Shedeur Sanders, Cam Ward, and Jalen Milroe all have the capability of possibly being a NFL quarterback that could put a couple years together, something like that, or at the very least being a like high end backup for a team. And they're all kind of barely hitting those thresholds of the intended air yards, the big time throw rate, even the interception rate, like that kind of thing. Obviously with Jalen Milroe, you kind of get into more of, you have that uber athletic player, but that doesn't really have like the completion rate and all that kind of stuff you would like to see, but they have that like game breaking ability with that. So it's three different types of players here, but they end up kind of being like scoring similarly in Debbie Beth, just because they hit for different reasons essentially, but like they all kind of end up in that like not perfect but not terrible either kind of realm. Aaron's saying that it sounds better now, so good. Hopefully we were past whatever that was. But Aaron, hopefully you heard that. How are you feeling on those three players? Are you okay kind of grouping them together, or would you rather like tier them a little differently there?
Yeah, no, I'm gonna tier them differently, and you're gonna see a wide range of opinions on this draft class. So I think that's gonna be very commonplace to see some varying opinions. And I think Shador Sanders is gonna be lower down. I don't see the upside with him. Okay, so Shador Sanders, yes, he's been good in the Big 12. I think he takes too many sacks. I don't think he's athletic. I don't know that he's going to be a guy who's going to be the hardest working, there's just a sense of entitlement with him. And I try not to get too into that. But I just don't know if that's a guy who's going to work his butt off to be the very absolute best quarterback that he could possibly be. And Shador, he might get very good draft capital or opportunity to play because of his dad. But I mean, at the end of the day, I just don't think he really has it unless he lands in that perfect system. Because I think he can operate within a very, very like well protected system with good weapons. Like if you inserted him into what Jared Goff is doing for the Lions, or maybe like a Sean McVay offense, or something where there's that structure and that quarterback friendly type of system, yeah, maybe he could succeed. But there's not a lot of situations like that right now, and I think Shador will really struggle at the next level. Now, Jalen Milroe, yes, there's definitely some question marks with him as well, but he is just such a dynamic rushing threat at the quarterback position. And I think that he needs to land in the right spot, yes, but he can rely on that on the legs, and he has some arm talent. He has been throwing too many interceptions this season, unfortunately, but it's not like he's been an absolute disaster passing either. Like he's been fine. He's had some really good weapons to throw to, well, especially Ryan Williams, a true freshman. But at the end of the day, it is a true freshman, and it's like Jeremy Bernard, and go down the list, and it's not like he has quite the Alabama wide receivers of old outside of the very talented 17-year-old Ryan Williams. So I think Jalen Milroe, he translates as this boomer bust type of guy, like very, very high ceiling, closest thing that you get to a Lamar Jackson in this class, that's for sure. But is he going to get to those heights? He's not that polished yet. There's just question marks there. But I definitely see him as a guy that I'm much more interested in compared to Shador. And then Cam Ward, he is a guy who can be inconsistent. He isn't always the most clutch. Like I think at times he looks like Jameis Winston out there making some bad decisions, but at the end of the day, the guy, he seems to have really all the arm talent that you want. Very solid statistically this season, not perfect, but like you said, he catches your eye because okay, I could see him working out at the next level. So again, I'm not comping him to Jameis Winston. Like that is not exactly what I'm doing there, but I am saying he's a guy who can be inconsistent as a passer and as a decision maker and leader of an offense. And this is as a fifth-year quarterback. I believe he's in his fifth year there. He's transferred up 2 different times in competition levels. He still looked good, but yeah, there's certainly some concerns there. But I think Cam Ward, for me, he's a top. Where do I have him? A top 3 quarterback in this class. I think Jalen Milroe's right there as well. So have those guys a little bit higher.
All right, I don't know what the hell happened there. I
All right, we are back. Florida's getting hit with another hurricane. No,
No, I don't know what's going on. You know what? I'm starting to understand that StreamYard might not like Debbie Beth very much, because I feel like on our last pod I was doing the same thing where I was trying to, just scroll through a sheet, and all of a sudden it like blocks me out of everything. It kicks me out of StreamYard, kicks me out of everything. So I don't know what's going on with that. Hopefully we're still alive. I'm not 100% sure, but yeah, I don't have any of my numbers anymore, but. I don't even know exactly what you said. I will say, I definitely agree with the upside part with Jalen Milroe. It just, the upside is there. I don't think, like you kind of compared him to a Lamar Jackson. I honestly think that even Lamar Jackson was a better thrower or a better passer coming into the NFL and everything. But I like honestly, I mean, it doesn't say much, but I really feel like he is a better Anthony Richardson at this point, like a slightly better Anthony Richardson. It's not saying much. It's like maybe Anthony Richardson with a few more games under his belt or something. Like I don't know exactly what to call it, but that's what I'm kind of wondering if it was. But oh, here we go. I got my numbers back. We're back.
I love that. And
Nope.
just to clarify too, I mean, definitely not a comp to Lamar Jackson, just the closest thing to him in this type of a class, or as a player in this class. It's just stylistically, he's that Konami code. He's that rushing quarterback. He has just very, very high upside with his legs. And we love that for fantasy production, fantasy situations. So he could be in the right system, and he could be like a Jalen Hurts, or it doesn't have to be Lamar Jackson. But those concerns are definitely valid. Like, yes, he does not have the strongest production profile at all, but last year he proved that he belongs as a quarterback. He's certainly doing some nice things this year, even with a kind of an inexperienced and new receiving core at Alabama. So, and a brand new coach. So there's a learning curve there. Could he stay for another year? Absolutely. But who has really high upside in this class? Jalen Milroe. And you'll actually remember back like 2 years, it was either his freshman season or going into his second season. That was kind of my comp with Jalen Milroe. It's like slowly bring him along as a passer, and hopefully he can get to like a Jalen Hurts type of college player. Now, I'm not saying like he's going to be that at the NFL level, but just as a kind of a prospect, improving year after year, just have to get the right quarterback coach in there to develop him. And I think DeBoer is the perfect guy for that. Just another year at Alabama would do him a lot of good, because we saw that Michael Penix just looked amazing in that Washington system. We'll see what Jalen Milroe does, but either way, pretty big upside there. And then I guess all I was saying with Cam Ward is just the inconsistency there. I can still see him leading an offense and getting very high draft capital. You'll see him as the quarterback one in the class amongst a fair amount of folks out there. He's getting some hype. And again, the inconsistencies worry me, yes, but I like him a fair amount for sure. I have him in a C2C league. He's been great for me, but will he be great for the NFL? That's a different question.
Absolutely. And that brings us to my favorite QB in the class. And I believe on the last pod, I even asked you, I can't remember, did I ask you or did I ask Andy on Devy U, what the hell that whole time?
Sorry,
I
you
don't
have
know
to
what's
repeat
going
one
on.
more time for me.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that.
No, you're good.
Something's going on with my computer. I don't know what's going
One
on.
more time.
Uh,
One more time for the folks in the back.
this is a mess. So, what I was saying, or what I was trying to say, was that brings us to the final player in the class, the player that I like the most in the class, in Jackson Dart, and I just don't understand if why can't people get on board with Dart? Like, I get the whole Matt Corral thing, I get the scheme and everything, but I just don't understand. Like, even if you look at the numbers between Jackson Dart and Matt Corral at the same school, with even similar situations or whatever, like Jackson Dart's numbers are better. And Matt Corral's numbers actually fell off in his senior season, Whereas we're seeing Jackson Dart get substantially better in each individual season. Because I mean, he wasn't even like he was a high end prospect, but I mean, did not do great in his freshman season, his sophomore season. It was his junior year and now his senior year where all of a sudden he's taking this huge leap. But we're actually seeing it happen. You know, the intended air yards, the big time throw rate, like all those numbers, the adjusted yards per attempt, like sometimes it's not that difficult. Like, you know, people want to say these like 150 different stats and metrics for these QBs, but like it's pretty easy if you hit a big time throw rate percentage, if you hit intended air yards, and if you hit an adjusted yards per attempt number of like 9 or more. Generally speaking, you're going to be a pretty good prospect. I mean, then we can dive into a bunch of other stuff with Jackson Dart, but I mean, just that. I mean, he's substantially hitting all of those numbers and then some. He pushes the ball down the field. He even has some wheels. He can get out of the pocket. He can move. He's not a statue out there. And yet, no one seems to be willing to put Jackson Dart out there except for us. And I just really don't get it.
Yeah. Yeah. At the end of the day, he gives you that most steady overall profile and he just sneaks up on people. I mean, folks were not high enough on him, and you just see a lot of take luck out there in general with QB analysis. And that's why you're still seeing guys like Garrett Nussmeier mocked just like a top 4 guy in the class. Like Dane Brugler put him as QB4 just pretty recently. And I think that he's going to adjust that with time because Dane's a sharp guy, but certainly, you know, he needs to have Jackson Dart in there. He's not in this top 4 for Dane Brugler, who's pretty locked in with NFL analysis and well, not NFL, but like prospect analysis typically. So that is an issue, but I think that will correct itself. More and more people will come around, and you and I have definitely advocated for Dart all along here. And there's been some struggles, understandably, this season, but some of that coincides with losing his best wide receiver there in Trey, and then also just a little tougher competition. It's not like he's completely fallen off. He just took a little step back. That's all. And I think that Jackson Dart, if he gets Trey back, if he can finish really strong, and I think they're going to be a playoff team, that could be a big boost to his draft profile. It's like how you finish that season makes a big difference. And he's healthy right now, so he's set up pretty well to finish as a top guy in this draft class. So I like him overall. He combines a little bit of mobility as a passer and as a rusher, which I like, to combine with that solid passing that you were describing. I have a couple other guys, though, I do want to touch on in this quarterback class. I don't know if you had anybody else that you wanted to mention, but it sounded like, you know, that was kind of the top. And then, you know, we went through a couple guys who were kind of soured on or not finding to be that spectacular earlier, but I have a couple of sleepers. I don't know if you can truly call them sleepers because they're fairly well-known guys, but guys that I still kind of like, depending on, you know, how things shake out the rest of the season, where they get drafted, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, you know what? I'm running low on time because I have to move on and also do the Devy University pod. And so we were going to do the full state of the QB union or whatever you want to call it, but maybe we should just stick to the 25 class for now, and then we can talk more about the 26 and 27 classes in future pods if that works for you.
Yeah, it does. I was going to mention a couple of guys, and I'll just list them off here. Don't have to go into depth, of course, because of the time restraints. But I mean, in this class, Will Howard at Ohio State has actually taken a step forwards this year, and he's sneakily kind of improving in some of his deficiencies, interceptions, and also looking pretty good with his completion percentage, with his passing touchdowns. And his passing yards per attempt, like all those things. And he continues to be a rushing threat. He's going to get you goal line touchdowns, production. And so those things, I have a little bit of intrigue there. Am I saying he's a top 5 guy? No, but I'm not going to be surprised at all if I start hearing his name more and more and more, especially if he finishes strong this season. So that's Will Howard at Ohio State. And then I think that, who else was I definitely wanting to include here? But yeah, that was just one name for sure that I wanted to bring up.
Another name that we didn't really touch on, and I'm not even 100% sure that he is coming out. In fact, might even assume that he's not coming out, is Drew Allar out of Penn State. You know, he definitely,
that was it.
Definitely Okay. I mean, he definitely has the ability to come out. He is a part of this class technically. He's just another one, and he's actually a little bit better than Beck as far as in my ranks. I kind of skipped over him, but he doesn't hit really any of the thresholds. But I mean, every film grinder is going to tell you he has the biggest arm, his arm's live, and all that kind of stuff. And he has the tools. He has everything you're looking for. We just haven't actually seen it in college, unfortunately. And so, the big time throw rate's at 3.5%. The intended air yards 8.6%. He doesn't really turn the ball over, which is nice, but I mean, it's because he's dinking and dunking. He's not pushing the ball down the field. He's not showing us those NFL throws, even though supposedly he has the NFL arm. I really don't think he comes out in this class, but I mean, he is a part of the class, and he definitely has to be mentioned here. And then the only other player I think that like truly needs to be mentioned in this class, I well, he was not a player that I was really high on or anything like that, but he kind of crept up until about mid-season. He had a terrible game, and it was Kyle McCord. Since then, he's kind of come back and looked a little bit better, but I mean, he just had this one terrible game that just like everyone was like, nope, never mind. But I mean, this year, I don't know what it was going over to what is it, Syracuse? Is that right?
Yep, that's correct.
Yeah, Syracuse. Yeah, I don't know what it was about going to Syracuse from Ohio State, but all of a sudden he started pushing the ball down the field. He started making those big time throws, and he really wasn't turning the ball over, nearly as much as not that he was ever turning the ball over in the past, but I mean, he has pushed the limit there a little bit. He's up to 2.4%, so obviously he's turned the ball more. But I mean, I don't even mind it that much because he's showing us the gunslinger mentality, like that kind of thing. But he's pushing the ball down the field and turning the ball over. He's not throwing it, 5 yards down the field and turning the ball over. So I'm not saying I'm super high on Kyle McCord or anything like that. But I feel like if we're going to talk about a Will Howard, I would much rather talk about a Kyle McCord, honestly.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I think the rushing upside there is much more appealing with Will Howard, and I think that at the end of the day, he's become more accurate, and maybe it's partially because of the wide receivers he's playing with, but I just really can't get there with Kyle McCord. I mean, outside of that blow up game, you're right. He's been better this year. Just getting out of that Ohio State system did wonders for him. So, Ohio State, it's not like that's magically elevated Will Howard. I think he has actually improved because we see a guy who didn't really put up that great of production there at Ohio State, and now we're actually liking him at Syracuse. It's kind of funny how that has changed for Kyle McCord, but in a positive way, like you illustrated. But Drew Allar was definitely the other guy I wanted to bring up at Penn State, and he's just making some good strides this year, considering the wide receiver he's throwing to. I mean, it was bad. And then last year, he was pretty good as far as 25 touchdowns to 2 interceptions. I mean, that was also solid last year. The guy is he's pretty good with the ball. He's just not pushing it downfield because there's nobody to pass it to. And in some ways, I feel bad for him. It's kind of like a JJ McCarthy type of deal in some ways. Probably not going to quite get the recognition that he deserves, or some of the raw stat producing, fame and whatnot, just because of where he plays. Jewel R, he's an intriguing guy, traits guy. I really think that he could be one of the better guys in this class if he was just in a different system, and maybe he needs another year of development. So there's a good chance he stays back, but watch for him. He plays for a top 4 team right now in college football, or at least I think Penn State's at the 4 slots right now. So certainly could make some noise here in the college football playoffs. We'll see how Penn State stacks up there. But Drew Allar, I mean, 6'5", 238 pounds. He does have the arm talent, but you're just not seeing him push it down the field there in that system and that team.
Yeah, unfortunately, this is not the greatest QB class. In fact, we can't even say that the next couple classes are all that spectacular as of right now either. There are some, quality players which we will touch on in the future, and we've already talked about some of them in the past. Obviously, your Arch Mannings and players like that, but we'll talk about that in future pods. Are you willing to put Jackson Dart into your tier 1 of QBs in this class, or would you say that he's more of a tier 2 guy for you?
Yeah, no, he's definitely been tier one, and Jackson Dart's been tier one. I think most of the season for me, or maybe the whole season. It's fluctuated a little bit. Like the ranks have flopped. I mean, I like Cam Ward up there. I like Jalen Milroe up there, but Jackson Dart has the most clean profile altogether, and I really want to see him finish strong because, he's giving us a little bit of a worry there with a slight drop off for a couple games, and I think he'll get back to it. He just beat Georgia. I think that there's a lot of hype now with that. And yeah, Ole Miss should make the playoff, you would think here. So as of right now, Jackson Dart, QB1.
You love to hear it, and you heard it here first. QB1, Jackson Dart is your QB1 for the 2025 class. Unfortunately, you don't hear that nearly enough. In fact, mostly not at all. But is the God honest truth. And like I said, you heard it here first. We really do appreciate you guys listening to a little strategy talk, a little QB talk, and a little Jordan Tyson talk at the beginning. But actually, I'm hoping that you guys will follow me over to the Devy University pod, which I'm going to be switching over to as soon as I get off here. And we are actually going to do a 2025 rookie mock draft with our good friend Corey Pereira from campus2canton.com. And we're going to try to make it a little more realistic than some of the other rookie mocks that I've been hearing recently. So we're gonna try and get Jackson Dart some love, get some of these players that maybe don't get quite enough love, some love in those things. I apologize for whatever audio and video errors we were having and issues we were having earlier. Hopefully it wasn't too much of an issue. But we will be back in your ears as soon as possible. But for now, we're going to go ahead and cash out. We will see you guys next time.